Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Happy Future Friday. We are so thrilled to have all of you joining us for our conversation about cities as hubs of innovation. It is a beautiful spring day, and we are thrilled to be the second in our series, all about cities as different things. And today's discussion is all about innovation. We're going to give you all a chance to introduce yourselves. We always like to give a couple minutes off the top to let everybody roll in. And of course, want to give you a fun fact for those that haven't been to our physical space in Washington, D.C. I hope you'll come and visit when you get an opportunity. So many incredible features. And here is an interesting fact about the frieze that goes around the exterior of our space as well. So, for those that do not know or were not on our first Future Friday last month, Future Fridays is actually part of an ongoing initiative called Future Cities. And it's my pleasure, James Ball, to be the director of Future Cities at the National Building Museum. And we cannot do this work without the support of our sponsors. So I have to start off by recognizing AARP, Rooted Communities, Wayne and Ursula Quinn, who have already come on to get us going on this. And we are in so many conversations with incredible organizations and companies that are joining us as we start to tell this optimistic story about the direction that cities are headed. I am joined right now by Eileen Fuchs, our executive director. While all of you are introducing yourselves in Slido, which you will see pop up, I want to give Eileen a chance to also introduce herself and welcome you all here today.
Hi, James. Thanks. I'm coming to you from the museum, sort of, not really. Really excited to be here today and to be part of this conversation. Future Cities is dynamic and wonderful. What a great group we have today. I'm excited. That's all I got.
Eileen, and while you stay on, I have to say something. You are one of the most innovative people I have had the pleasure of working for, and I mean that in the truest
Boom.
compliment.
Back at
So,
you.
so this is it's truly a great theme. And as you're for those that aren't in Slido yet, please go ahead, share your organization. Since this is a city-based conversation, we thought please go ahead and share which city you are joining us from. And we say your city. I realize that might be a physical location for you. Maybe you identify with a different city. Welcome you to put the city of your choice. So I see Griff Lee is already joining us from Potomac, Maryland. Again, feel free to pop into Slido and type. I realize it does say type your question there. We're breaking all the rules. Innovation is disruptive, and we are letting you type in your location and where you're joining us from. So, joining us, in addition to all of our participants, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity for you participants to share your thoughts as we get into this, is I want to share our panelists as well. Each of these panelists is working in an aspect of innovation that really complements each other from different areas of academia, of industry, of quasi-public-private innovation hubs. And so, without further ado, I will let Kent, Tyler, and Gideon come onto the camera and join us. I asked them to do their own introductions because I think best to hear some of their work and their organizations and what they're doing directly from their own perspective. So if I may, can we start with you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you're doing around innovation.
Sure, James. Great to be here. I am an architect, and I'm on the faculty at MIT. I'm director of the City Science Center here at the MIT Media Lab. Also co-director of the Norman Foster Institute on Sustainable Cities in Madrid. We have a pretty broad focus. We look at urban modeling, simulation, compact, transformable housing, ultralight autonomous vehicles, next generation governance. We operate a network of affiliated city science labs around the world. And whenever we get opportunities, we launch spin-off companies.
Let me pass it over to Gideon to share your background.
Hi, everybody. Gideon D'Arcangelo. I'm with Arup in my home city of New York, lifelong New Yorker. And Arup, we are a global design and engineering firm, and we're dedicated to shaping a better world through our expertise in sustainable development. At Arup, I am the leader of digital services for Arup in the Americas region, Canada and the US. And what that means is we have a range of innovative services around data strategy, BIM, geospatial, software development, creating digital roadmaps in various ways of supporting the digital transformation of our clients as they go through planning, design, construction, and operations of major projects. My day-to-day practice, I'm an experienced designer, which means I practice a form of human-centric design, which is focused on creating more efficient, effective, and delightful experiences in the built environment.
Incredible. Gideon, we're so grateful to have you. And last but certainly not least, Tyler.
Thanks, James. My name is Tyler Sweedock. I'm the executive director of the Colorado Smart Cities Alliance, which is a nonprofit ecosystem anchored by governments and infrastructure owners here in the state of Colorado. My job is to really source their needs and the challenges that they're facing in their communities, and expose them to the private sector and create a marketplace for the actual implementation of a lot of these ideas that will be building our future cities. We have over 80 different projects testing different innovations, from snow plowing robots to bidirectional EV charging. Happy to talk about a lot of those today.
Awesome. Well, we're so grateful to have all of you join us for this conversation. Again, as I think everybody can see here, an incredible diversity of perspectives and hands-on direct work being innovative in and around cities. So the way this conversation is going to go is I'm going to hand it over to Kent to kick us off with a dose of optimism. This is a way for us to really orient ourselves to this idea that the future can be bright. And as the Future Cities Initiative at the National Building Museum is oriented, we want to bring inspiration to the conversation around cities are headed. So Kent is going to give us a brief talk in that way. We will have an opportunity for some questions for Kent and along the other panelists. And then we will move into our ideas cast, which is an opportunity for all of you to share your ideas, stories, and innovations as well. But without further ado, let me turn it over to Kent for a dose of optimism.
Great. Okay, I'll take about 10 minutes and give a very high-level view of some of the work we're doing. First of all, here at the City Science Center, we think of our work as focusing on hyperlocal solutions to global challenges. I think most people know that 90% of the patents and wealth come from urban areas. Most of the population growth will take place there, and 70 to 80% of the CO2 emissions. So all of the action, in my opinion, is in urban areas, cities, particularly with national governments sort of backing off on addressing some of these challenges falls to the mayors and local communities. This is our lab right in back of me here. And if you come into our lab, you'll see these physical models. We call them cityscopes with projection, and they're interactive. These are many of the cities we're working on: San Sebastian, and Chile, Kendall Square, et cetera. And then on the wall, you can see some of the themes that we focus on. I don't have time to go through all of these, but I'll just hit a few of the highlights. We have for many years worked on mobility solutions. This was the city car that we finished about 15 years ago, but it had robot wheels, drive-by-wire. It was set to be autonomous. It folded so you could get 3 cars in a parallel parking space, and we built a full-scale prototype. When we finished that, though, I thought, well, we need to still a car. We want to think about moving away from cars in cities. So we focused on a little 3-wheel autonomous vehicles. This has LiDAR and the kind of sensing you find on a Waymo. And it also has a condition box on the back so it can deliver people or packages autonomously, particularly takeout food. And then I thought, well, let's push it even farther. So we turned a bicycle dynamically into a tricycle, also use the light autonomy we use for autonomous vehicles. So you call for it like an Uber, and then the bike goes on to pick someone else up. Transformable environments. We've had a lot of fun with this over the years. This is our city home that we did about 10 years ago. So you can see it has a queen size bed. This is in 200 square feet, by the way. An office, a dining area for 6 people, a living room, a little bathroom that opens up to be a walk-in bathroom. And then we launched a company, Ori Living. This is in Hudson Yards in New York, one of the apartments. We're now in over 100 buildings in 30 cities. So you see the bed disappears. You have an office on demand, a walk-in closet on demand. So we can basically double the functionality of an apartment space. We have a partnership with Marriott to take these ideas to hotel rooms now. Our urban performance model. So we don't just build prototypes of systems. We try to analyze more holistically the urban performance. And one of the reasons we want to do this, because if you look at the IPCC report, the yearly average carbon budget for every person on the planet through 2050 is about 2.5 tons of carbon per person per year to have an 80% chance of limiting global warming to 2 degrees centigrade. And this is Kendall Square, where I am, where MIT is, calculates over 17 tons of carbon. So that would take a 7x reduction. So we decided to build a tool that could look at a whole range of urban interventions, systems, but also live work symmetry, new energy sources, incorporating some of the innovations we've been working on, like compact housing. And we're looking for the win-win-win, where you have both environmental, social, and economic performance. So we just cranked everything up to maximum, and to see what chance we have of getting down to that 2.5. And it turns out almost everything that's useful happens at the scale of the community. And the most important, way more important than electric vehicles, was to put housing near jobs and amenities. That had by far the greatest impact, and also the greatest social and economic impact. We then put this in the Boston Museum, where kids could come and run through different scenarios and understand and hopefully set priorities for what they can focus on when they come of age. Consensus, this is really key, because we have a lot of good ideas. We can model them, we could show they could work. Unless the community comes together and reaches consensus, very little happens. This is our Cityscope platform. I think of it as a consensus machine. Here, this is actually Kendall Square, where we're changing the land use and the density and toggling on different systems. And we get real-time feedback according to all these metrics. I don't have time to get into it. We can talk about this later if you want. And then we extended this into what we call an immersive Cityscope, where we have the physical model, make changes there, but also speak prompts and generate in real time visualizations of whatever you're interested in. Just a couple of quick case study projects for consensus. A few years ago, Boston was looking at putting in a new bus rapid transit system. They were connecting in Dudley Square. So we built 3 of our Cityscope platforms at the regional community street scale, and did workshops in the community center, where in this case, someone could identify where they live, where they work, and how various system options would change their commute time, or where the stations would be located. In this case, they could move these optically tagged Lego bricks around, representing stations, or in this case, the streetscape with the station on the curbs, or the gold standard in the center, replace parallel parking with bike lanes. And as they did this, they'd get real-time feedback as to the throughput of cars or bicycles. And by that way, that gentleman there, he was from the community. So we had the facilitators all be from the community, so they could more speak the language of the local people. And we experimented, of course, with augmented reality, so people could see the data on the physical model in various, more compelling ways. Case study in Hamburg, Germany. We started working with Hamburg to help them develop the community for the sports event. This is Mayor Olaf Scholz, who became the chancellor, that we were working with. And then they got this influx of refugees from the war in Syria. The mayor lost the referendum. They were looking at a horrible, challenging problem of developing permanent housing for what they were looking at, up to 70, 80,000 refugees. So we built another Cityscope platform. This is the opening with Olaf, and we did something like 44 workshops with people from the community. They would come in and they'd identify an area of interest where they could propose to build housing that would create a Zoom window to this larger table. And they could place these bricks around representing units, and they'd get feedback as to access to schools and jobs and housing and whatnot. At the end of the session, the table would look like this, and they'd come back. And it was a kind of healthy competition to see which district could accommodate the most refugees. It empowered the people that wanted to creatively engage in the problem and disempowered those that wanted to disrupt. This was an article in the Atlantic about the project, Germany's radical pro-refugee urban planning experiment, but it really had nothing to do with urban planning. It was really about consensus building. Cityscope Network. So we have these labs around the world. We've been working with them for 10 years. We help them get established. Some of them have up to 40 people now working locally. So we have this pretty powerful network. We share our tools and ideas and work together. Our newest lab, we're just about to open in San Francisco. This is to help them with the rezoning. And again, it's really all about consensus, not about urban planning. So we picked a district to focus on, and we're building platforms where we can model the impact of various alternatives for the rezoning. In this case, you can see the performance metrics on one screen and an agent-based model on the other. Another station, it's approached a little bit differently, where we have the analytical view on the lower screen and the experiential with rendering. So how does it change the character of the neighborhood, and how does the performance change with these different interventions? So here's some of our studies, trips in and out of the district, where there might be congestion. And of course, we model this for the various scenarios, where there's areas of dense human interaction. If you see this yellow dot on the left, that's following one individual, and we're looking at doing studies of a day in the life of typical profiles of people, in this case, a young mother taking her child to daycare, and looking how the community could evolve over time, and looking at more experiential, how these communities might change as density increases and buildings get developed and the streetscape evolves. And the last thing I will mention, because I think this is maybe the most important thing that we're working on right now, we think of it as beyond zoning, creating more dynamic, incentive-based, algorithmic approaches to zoning. Kendall Square may be the greatest innovation district in the world. Many think it is, but it's totally out of whack. You can see the office space over time increasing, but the percentage of housing for the workforce decreases. There's no feedback mechanism. So we're looking at creating a new system where we do a deep analysis of each neighborhood. We then have algorithms, models that proposes ranked order lists of incentives to achieve the goals. This goes to the community and to the supervisors. This is really kind of a non-voting AI that will advise the supervisors. They can accept this, and then the developers could have hundreds of amenities they could pick from, mapped to incentives, in this case, community center and family housing, and a percentage of that can go into a community endowment. And the developer picks from the list, and then the list is updated in real time. It goes back. This is an iterative process with feedback mechanisms. And over time, you get all of the amenities that you need in a neighborhood so that you have housing and jobs and amenities all in harmony. So I think I'll wrap up there. I think that was about 10 minutes, and I'd be happy to start a conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Kent. I mean, absolutely incredible work, and I bet you could go on for hours about all other projects and the nuances of this. So plenty more. Yes, I'll welcome Gideon and Tyler to come back on screen. I'm already seeing some questions coming into Slido. I want to encourage all of our participants that got inspired by that to also share their questions. We've got about 10 minutes right now to make sure all your questions get answered. I have some of my own, but since Priya was right on top of it, I want to elevate her voice here. She says, "Thank you for the presentation. How can community organizers and researchers work together to advocate for solutions in their own cities?" So, and I'd like to just add to that to say, there's this question of the ecosystem of stakeholders and people that are involved in working on this. Ken, I'll start with you. You're in an academic setting. Who do you tend to work with? What are your partners that you work with? Have you ever worked with community organizers in that way?
Well, I showed the Hamburg project. We worked with the local community to do that. We didn't actually do those sessions. We had a local facilitator do. We designed the platform. We're doing the same thing now in San Francisco. I mean, we're working with the mayor's office, the Office of Housing and Economic Development, a local group called Spur, which will probably manage these community engagement sessions. We're working with California YIMBY. There's a whole network of community activists and government offices that we can collaborate with. It's absolutely essential. I mean, we can't be in the ground and on the ground in all these places handling this. But what is lacking, I find, are the kind of data-driven, evidence-based platforms that allow people to, in a very agile way, explore scenarios, learn about the issues. Right now it's often quite binary. Do you like that tall building or not? No, I hate tall buildings. It's not, let's oppose it. But we can enter into a much more nuanced process where if you're looking at increasing density, like what are the benefits of density? You bring families in, affordable housing for families if you do it right. They go to the schools are failing. You can support the schools. You have more amenities, better restaurants. If you get supply and demand more in sync, the housing prices will go down. So these are the kind of benefits I think you need to model in order to have really, meaningful engagement with the community.
Yeah, well, and part of what you're bringing there is, yeah, how, right? Like, how, and we're going to spend plenty of time talking about this how, because I think that's so critical. But I want to just offer Tyler and Gideon opportunity to come in here, maybe just to make it even more poignant. Like, who is the ideal partner for you from your perspective? Gideon, maybe I can start with you. You're working for a company. You have a client, but I'm wondering really from this partnership and collaboration standpoint when it comes to innovation. What are some examples you have?
Well, I think we work with both private and public clients always, and I think that we're in the age where these problems can only be solved through partnership, and it's great that we can bring our experts to the table. But it's really part of the job of innovation these days is orchestration and being able to actually bring to facilitate collaboration to get this outcomes that we're talking about. I was really inspired, actually, Kent, by your presentation, and you were using agent-based modeling, I believe, in one of those to show maybe how people move through the city. I was wondering if you then marry that to the actual data, how people move through the city, and create a learning loop. Is that part of your methodology and practice when you were talking about data-driven conversation starters for urban planning?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with the data analytics. So, we use telecom data and all kinds of
Yeah.
other data to understand the demographic profiles and their patterns and how they access the resources in a community. And then from that, we can build the agent-based model that if we do it right, it's a plausible simulation then of a future that doesn't yet exist. In other words, we can add more housing and amenities and using the same, behavioral profiles, demographic profiles, model that. And then of course, what we would like to do, and we'll eventually get there, is do all that in real time. So people in the community could propose different changes, maybe different density scenarios or land uses or amenities, a dog park, whatever, and then update the simulations in real time. We don't really have the computational power now to do that actually in real time. So we have to kind of pre-cook different scenarios, but eventually we'll get there.
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you.
Tyler, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question of the future of cities, who's the best partner, I would say cities, right? But unfortunately, they have a lot of capacity constraints in order to engage in innovation. Um, and there are so many ideas and so many technology solutions out there that cities can use as tools to
Yeah.
approach the challenges that we all face. But at the end of the day, like cities have to change their behavior, they have to change their process in order to implement these things. So, for example, um, new development. So, as Kent properly mentioned, like our ways of engaging with new development are pretty outdated. You submit a PDF, a two-dimensional PDF to the city, and there's all these renderings that of this future thing that might actually happen. It might look this way, but we've worked with companies like one called Institute that uses augmented reality in order to visualize what that proposed development will look like in the real world. So
Yeah.
standing from your apartment balcony or from the sidewalk, scan the QR code and here's what it actually looks like. Which in theory sounds great. And when you talk to cities and you talk to developers, like, oh, that's interesting. But in practice, we found that this actually requires a whole new data standard for cities to have to ingest and to change their development review process. And turns out developers aren't always a fan of it, because if you actually show people what that development will look like in the real world, not everyone is going to be happy with what they propose. So going from theory to practice, like a lot of complications arise, and that's where the fun is.
Yeah. I already love this conversation that it's been rooted in community and how we engage communities in this and how that so appreciate you orienting in that direction. There's another great question from the audience here, Rashiraj, who asks, no project is the same. How does your research bring out the uniqueness of all cities and neighborhoods that your research involves? And again, I think, Kent, let me start with you here, but I think each of you might have a perspective in there's no one size fits all solution, perhaps. How do we think about that uniqueness of communities and individuals?
Well, and it's a great question, and that's actually why we launched our City Science Network, so we can have labs in Asia, North America, Latin America, Europe, and the Middle East, because cities are different and the culture is different. Just how people use outdoor space, and some are cafe societies, some only, some are not, et cetera. On the other hand, the office buildings are all pretty much the same. Everybody drives the same cars. They use the same mobile phones.
Mm.
There are a lot of similarities. And I do think the platforms that we're building have applications, particularly in the more affluent north. Now, we do have projects in the global south focused on informal settlements. And that's a very different strategy. I didn't have time to talk about some of the work we're doing there, but I think it's interesting to think about it because the North is very much top down and rule based, zoning and approvals, building codes, and it's incredibly hard to change and static. You go to informal settlements, and they're very organic and bottom up, and they're very responsive to the local and immediate needs of people. But the quality of life is much lower, and they typically don't have infrastructure for power and water. I think we need a third way. We need a third way that is much more organic and can evolve, but has the high quality of life and probably much more distributed infrastructure. And maybe that's a little bit of a tangent, but I think it gets to the point that all places are different and there's no one size fits all.
That's right. Yeah, I just maybe briefly, one of you, if either Tyler, didn't have something to add.
I'd love to add, we're working on downtown Providence, Rhode Island right now, and moved from the master planning phase to that to just into design now. And to your point, the job is to bring out the uniqueness of each city, right? That's the placemaking. That's a key part of this kind of revitalization effort. And so it's a lot of user research. We're working in an area where many people are experiencing homelessness, and we treated that constituent group, as well as the downtown commuters and the office workers and the university students, as a group to learn from and to understand the needs and do the needs assessment for all current users of the site, so that then we could then design to improve. That was one aspect. And the other is the data-driven aspect. I really love, for example, services like Strava, where people use that to track their exercise, their biking or their jogging.
Mm.
Strava data helps us really understand how people are exercising in the downtown Providence area. We can take that data and then we can use it to plan a better future based on current use and also maybe optimizing so we can improve in a data-driven way.
Yeah. Tyler, you want the last word there? And then I want to move us into the second half of our programming where we'll keep getting to chat. So, but yeah, final thought on that?
Sure, just briefly. I think in the smart city space that I work in, like there's this motto that if you've worked with one city, you've worked with one city. And not just from a people perspective and like the culture of each city, but from a systems and from an infrastructure perspective. All of our, especially in the United States, there's not a lot of uniformity to the traffic signal cabinets. That's just one example, right? And so if you are trying to work with the city and change something that they're doing, the process by which those things happen, the procurements, and then the actual infrastructure, the physical things in those cities, they're all different. And so it makes it difficult to scale things from one city to another.
Hmm.
There's some other great questions in here around equity and the time it takes to work with governments. We're going to get into that, but I want to switch formats a bit because what we just experienced is a traditional panel conversation. The audience asks some questions, I help moderate, and the panel gets to help give their expertise. But when we were thinking of how do we host a Future Friday where everybody can participate, we came up with this idea of an ideas cast. It's a nod to a newscast or a sports cast. And so I'm going to ask us to clear the chat here. I've made notes of the questions we didn't get to. And I'm going to pose some questions here on the screen behind me, virtual screen as it were. And I really want to encourage and ask all of the audience and participants to use that same function to share your ideas, share your thoughts. We want to hear from everybody on this call. I will note that you can upvote somebody's comment if you really liked it, and you can reply to somebody's comment if you want to start a conversation in Slido itself. So we will also let the panelists share their thoughts, but I want to encourage everybody, and maybe we can post that Slido link one more time so that everybody has an opportunity to get in there. So with that, it's the second half of our Future Friday, and we're going to kick it off with an easy one. Everybody gets to share what their favorite city invention is. Now, you can go way back and talk about the grid. You can talk about autonomous vehicles. Maybe it's skyscrapers. Wherever you are on your time scale of your favorite invention that is in or around cities. So we'll do, while people are starting to share their favorite city inventions in Slido, I'm going to go around the horn here. Tyler, how about you? Doesn't have to be one you've invested in. Any invention you love.
Sure. I am actually going to pick an invention that we do have the pleasure of working with. And it's a company called Pipe Dream. The premise is that in order for cities to avoid the massive congestion and emissions associated with the increase of deliveries in cities, right? Everyone wants to get their Amazon packages more and more quickly. And so let's treat goods like a utility and let's move them underground. And so this company has developed a series of automated electric robots that deliver goods underground and a series of 20-inch water pipe on rails. And so they are working with Peachtree Corners, Georgia, as well as trying to work with the city of Austin to install their first citywide network that will, or at least neighborhood-wide scale network that would do this. But you can imagine this type of thing working in New York City with the subway system, where they deliver goods to a portal, and then maybe that Uber Eats bicyclist comes and grabs a series of those things and delivers them the last inch or last mile. So I think a lot of promise for the future of cities with that idea.
Very cool. Before we go to Gideon, I'm going to read some from the audience here. I love that we've gone everything from the fun Ferris wheel to somebody early said proximity, which is arguably the invention of the city itself. So we've got some wide range of ideas there. How about you, Gideon?
No, someone got mine here in the chat with a bike share. Like bike share, I'm from New York, and bike lanes, Priya put in that as well.
Yeah.
It completely transformed my city, transformed my own personal life, but also added this whole data layer to New York, which is really interesting to watch.
That's great. And I know we talk about e-vehicles right now, but the e-bike movement right now is just absolutely incredible and exploding.
It is.
How about you, Ken?
I mean, I think those are good ones. I rode my e-bike in today, and but maybe building on what Tyler said, I wasn't going to go here, but a project we're working on right now that I'm pretty excited about is a delivery panda. We have the challenge of the last mile delivery,
Yeah.
but fewer people are thinking about the last meter. How do you get it from the curb up to the front stoop? And so we have a little funding from Taiwan from a Chinese guy that loves pandas to build a robotic actual panda that can grab a package from the vehicle on the curb and take it in its mouth and deliver it to the front stoop. And and be a fun presence in the community. I'm imagining that all the children would run out to see the panda delivering the packages, and so he asked us if we could build a panda, and I said, well, we'll only build a panda that has a useful purpose. So we decided to turn it into a delivery panda. So we'll see how that works out. But
Well, and Ken, it's so funny. You were talking about this really whimsical fun, and then it was like having a purpose to it. And I'm just again going back to the chat here. We've got everything from fun ideas around, of course, parks and dive bars and coffee shops, just these purely recreational fun things. I have to give a shout out to Abigail, the street crossing countdowns, a unique one to bring in from the audience here. So thank you all for that. That was a lot of fun to hear your favorite city inventions. Let's go to our next Ideas Cast question here. This is around, can you please describe, and again, we'll clear the chat in Slido so we can enter some new thoughts here. Describe your vision for cities as hubs of innovation. And as a museum, this is the joy of getting to be in a cultural institution. We can do these kind of visioning exercises, right? What does success looks like? What is that kind of vision of the future that we can all aspire to and be inspired by? So this can go a lot of different ways. Again, I want to encourage everybody to share their thoughts into Slido. And maybe Gideon, I can start with you on this. There's so many different elements here, but I welcome you to pick one of the pieces of what a city that is truly successful as a hub of innovation looks like or has in it.
It has in it a digital twin of itself, I would say. I'm going to go to that direction of a data sharing platform that takes all those various forms of data that you're relatively newly accumulating and arranges them so they can share with each other and correlate and look for patterns of correlation. I was saying earlier in our conversation before before this meeting, the airports are interesting prototype cities. They're small cities, and you can try a lot of things in a city because there is a boundary around it, and you can try a lot of things. You can do as probably a smart airport and get it to work before it's much harder to get a smart city to work because of all the boundarylessness and challenges that go with that. And so we've been, for example, did a project at LaGuardia recently at the new Terminal C where we created a common data environment. And every single device is speaking to each other, sharing data, and then sharing control. And you start to see some wonderful correlations and serendipities that happen when it happens at that scale. Really excited to see that happen at the city scale.
That's great. All right, so I'm hearing there's a digital component to this. Kent, how about you?
Well, you can think of it two ways. You could think of it as a hub of innovation where cities deploy design or technology innovation. I like thinking of it the other way, like innovation hubs, like where is innovation promoted and enabled, facilitated, and typically in cities, it's around a university, a research university.
Right.
Those are innovation hubs, and it's I mean, you take right here around MIT, there are literally hundreds of startups right around in Kendall Square, right around MIT, and Google and Microsoft and the big pharmas, Moderna, they all have their labs here. What Kendall Square is not is an innovation community, because hardly anybody lives here. There's almost no housing or amenities, and et cetera. So I think what makes a great innovation hub would be a research center with the housing and the amenities and the the public places, the restaurants and bars and cafes where people can exchange ideas, 24/7,
Yes.
basically. And, unfortunately, that doesn't really exist, but
Um,
it could, and it will eventually.
Kent, I don't know if you were reading from Jared's comment or you guys are just in the same wavelength, but we got a great comment from Jared in the chat that says 24/7 neighborhoods
There
with
you go.
opportunities to meet a diverse group of people in and outside the office, leading to the sparks of new ideas. So
There you go.
that physical
That's
space is key.
exactly right. And it's about diversity. It's, not so much, racial or income diversity that can be part of it, but experience diversity. You want people from all over the world with different backgrounds, because that's where the magic happens when you bring different cultures and different backgrounds together.
That's so right. Again, I don't think you're looking at the chat, but I'm going to bring in the comments that are reinforcing what you're saying. Kevin Chan says, a city that meets the diverse needs of all its residents. Not everybody works a 9 to 5 job. So a city should not only be for the 9 to 5 worker. And I can certainly relate to some of my best ideas are on a Friday night or on a weekend when I'm chatting with some friends. Um, Tyler, give you a chance. Give me another element of a vision for cities that are successfully hubs of innovation.
Yeah, well, I want to build on the physical space component. I think it's incredibly important for people to be able to physically meet. But in the space of cities, the most unique asset that cities have is infrastructure, like physical infrastructure, right? Streets and sidewalks and bike lanes and traffic signals and street lights. These are assets that the private sector does not have. And so giving access, like having an actual physical infrastructure geography that these innovators that are connecting in this hub have access to demonstrate or test whatever it is that they're building. This is becoming really important as what's called a living laboratory. And many cities actually across the world are providing these types of spaces and then directing the private sector and academia to say, we're interested in these problems. Can you help us focus on innovation around these issues? And you'll get access to our infrastructure.
The physical space part I love. I'm gonna throw a T out because yesterday I toured the True Reformer building on U Street in Washington, D.C., free for community groups, nonprofits to convene and group. The museum is a space for that as well, and more will be coming in future cities with that offering. I want to move on to our next question because we got a lot to cover. The logical one is okay. Sounds like a great vision. Of course, we're not there yet. So how do we get there? And I think the how comes into the players. I think it comes to some of these barriers. And I do, if I may, I'm going to bring back one of the questions from the earlier Q&A, which is that um, if we're going to assume that we want, for example, innovators, academics, researchers to work with cities, often those institutions work on different timescales, and the speed or the finances around what that looks like can be challenging. So forgive me for teeing up an even more specific question. Welcome you to take it where you want it, but how do we get there? What are some of the key, most prioritized steps we can take? Gideon, maybe I can start with you.
Sure. I think to stay on the theme that I've been sharing so far, I think that cities need to be working on their data sharing platform. We've done it. There's been a great amount of work done in New York City where we've been able to, for example, bring in flood related data and make that available and put that on an open data platform. And just cities are increasingly getting involved in the open data movement and making that information available so that they can collaborate with industry, collaborate with private organizations, and work towards looking for the solutions that will really help realize this vision of innovation.
Yeah. I want to bring in Shira's comment. I'm going to tee it up to you, Ken, which is Shira mentions co-creation and tools for visualizing, imagining possible futures. I think that's some of the work you are directly doing, if I'm wrong. And it does strike me. I wanted to say this comment earlier. You're really innovating not just in what we do, but how we do it. Innovating innovation, if I dare. So I'd be love to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, but I want to take it in a little bit different place. That's really critical, and we work a lot on that. We believe that, but I've become more interested in what are the mechanisms that will facilitate change.
Okay.
And I mentioned it briefly. I was running out of time, so I rushed through it, but I talked a little bit about zoning. So zoning is, in effect, the operating system of cities. It determines where people can live, where they work, they shop, they learn, how they move between these between places. And right now, it is just completely dysfunctional. It's sort of one size fits all rules. It's almost impossible to change. It tends to largely block housing that's needed in many cities, the approval process in particular, and then it can make cities increasingly unaffordable, except for the wealthy. I think that what we need we need new rules for the cities. We need rules that can adapt to changing economic and social and environmental conditions that have feedback mechanisms like a natural ecosystem. You've got these, we learn about these in school, these predator-prey feedback mechanisms. We have none of that between housing prices and housing supply, because everything is artificial. But I think we can bring in, and we can't do it really manually. That's where these new AI systems and algorithms can create a kind of an extended intelligence system where they're always crunching data and processing incentives and feeding that to city supervisors that can look for biases and unintended consequences and adjust the values to form this kind of symbiotic human machine public policy system. And that's what we're particularly excited about. We couldn't have done this a few years ago. Now I think we can see a way to that, and it's one of the things we'll be working on in San Francisco.
Well, and if just to try and synthesize a bit, right, our physical built world is so energy and cost intensive to change at times. So Gideon, I heard you on this as well, right? That digital twin, this ability to work in a space, in this case digital, that is much more easily able to iterate and simulate and explore. And then I'm also hearing within that, Ken, is there's the time and cost to change the physical environment, and then there's just the boundaries to what you're allowed to do, i.e. zoning in that space. And you and Jared clearly share a mind here because he brought up the zoning as being more flexible as well. And this is kind of the policy framework to let you then apply some of that digital iteration and ideas and feedback loops into actually shifting the physical built world around you.
Yeah, for example, just right now, if you apply for a new housing project for approval, there are just multiple steps, reports you have to file, studies you have to hire consultants for. There are just dozens of places where empowered stakeholders can stop the process. And, there's no reason why in 5, I don't know, 10 years, you couldn't hit a button and do all those studies. You could have a transportation model. You put in the new building, ding, you're done. You do the environmental study. I mean, I think we're going there, and very, very quickly, faster than people think. And the challenges are not really technological, they're human and political.
Yeah. The I want to build on Kent's comment about process. The process by which cities innovate is pretty narrow, and it's constrained to the tools they have to do daily business. And procurement is a big part of that, like how cities buy things. Most cities have to know exactly what they're buying and be very prescriptive about what it is that they're buying. Instead, we're trying to transform that perspective with a new process. It's called challenge-based procurement, where instead of defining the solution, you're just defining the problem, and you're allowing innovators like those that are on this webinar to submit ideas of how they could solve that problem in a new way. And we actually have a challenger right now that's about to open, focusing on streamlining the development review process. There's all sorts of AI tools out there that can help cities to more quickly review their own rules and align them with what the applicant has submitted. And it can increase review process times by like 90%. So, the process by which cities do things, I think, is really important to change if we want cities to change.
And it's been such a through line for future cities. I got to be honest with you, in this Future Fridays conversations we're having, I'm not that sure if that's because we're looking for it or it's just there for us. But and I want to bring up Kevin Chan in the chat is speaking to a similar thing around the community engagement, the voice of the resident. Ken, you were teeing that up with, right? This is like the people problem or question around innovation is so key. I want to just let's go one level deeper on that. What is something actionable that we can do? What is something we could change right now that would really unlock that human potential for cities to be more innovative? I know we talk policy at a high level, but I'm thinking around maybe it's just the who question, and the who needs to change in what way to really unlock this.
Well, I think what you could start with the community engagement process. I think cities should get rid of open mic sessions
Hmm.
where there's a PowerPoint presentation and then people go up to a mic one at a time and, you know, quite often yell at the presenter and get angry. That we found when you build a really think of it as learning and exploration, co-creation platform where people can creatively be engaged in the problem. And in that process, they learn and they make much more informed judgments. So right now it's really kind of opinion based, and we need a more of a data-driven, evidence-based, learning exploration process. And that maybe sounds vague, but we're building those platforms and we're
Mm.
deploying them and they again, there's no one size fits all, but you have to do it for whatever issue you're facing in a particular place according to their needs. So they have to be quite bespoke, which is the challenge. But I think we can build them and create a new process.
I
Yeah.
think there's such a wisdom. Yeah, please go ahead again. There's so
Probably
much here.
Kent really sparked an idea with the community engagement process we've been going through for downtown Providence. For that, what we ended up doing, because a lot of it happened during COVID and not everyone could convene, we created a really good 3D model of the site and that allowed people to traverse through the site. And then the idea was to get as many voices talking as we possibly could around what the future of the site needed to be. So I think it was more about getting a chorus of voices rather than one person at the mic responding. And so people were able to go to the area in the site and say, "This is the area I feel unsafe," or "I really love playing guitar over here," or and so on. And it did really work well. Now, of course, not every audience was ready to deal with this online digital platform, so we had to do other things where we went to people's places and put a table out there with things to draw on. You need to also think of the different ways to engage people. But yeah, I think being innovative in the community engagement process is key, as Ken put it there.
Yeah, to me, there's just two things to pull out. Is one is the way you structure an experience or an interaction creates an adversarial or a alignment based kind of effort. And so that kind of shared space of, hey, we're collaborating on this versus you're going to hold down your position and I'm going to hold down mine, really leads to different results. So yeah, Tyler, go ahead and bring in your voice here.
Yeah, I'm just going to build on this theme with kind of an actionable example of what cities are already doing in this space. It's called participatory budgeting. So today, whenever a city department has a budget, people in that department often decide how they're going to spend it, right? And they might have a community meeting or something. But in this case, we're actually using technology to facilitate a process where the community is submitting ideas of what they might want to spend that $1 million on a park, for example. They crowdsource these solutions. AI helps them to develop themes, and then ultimately it's a democratic process. Like the people in that community actually vote on how that budget should be spent. The city staff develop those ideas into like actual budgets, and it's a very democratic process, and it creates a whole new, very real way to interact with your local government and change your local neighborhood. And so those things are happening today.
Yeah, fantastic. Let me move us to our next question. Again, I think we could go on for some time around that, but I think part of the fun and excitement of innovation is just hearing about the work being done right now in this space. I want to especially, this was really a nod to the people that are listening in and participating in Slido, because of course our panel has gotten to share some of the innovative work they're doing. I will give them a chance to highlight another project, but part of this is I'd love if anybody wants to share in Slido something innovative they're working on. This would be a chance to let our panelists discuss and consider some of the ideas that you all have as well. Let me actually, I'm going to tease one of my own, which is I will say that we are building within Future Cities right now, and I will give no details, but only to say that this idea of community participation in how we reimagine and aspire to a better built world is something we are currently building around. So more announcements to come there, but that's part of innovation. Sometimes there's a secret mode before we announce big things. Ken, do you want to highlight one other kind of project you're particularly excited about right now?
Oh, oh gosh,
I know, to pick one, right?
but okay, I'll give you one. One is we call it infrastructure hubs for informal settlements. And this will be a ways away from our topic, but the idea is people in these informal settlements I mentioned earlier, they don't typically have sanitation, city water. So we're looking at in Brazil partnering with this fantastic group that called Usina de Paz, which is peace factories. They build these community centers in an informal settlement, what many people would call a slum. And they provide services, legal services. They have classes, medical care. And we're looking at bringing into that, providing power and processing water and purifying water, rather, processing waste, providing communications, Wi-Fi networks. So these centers become these service and infrastructure hubs that the community can more organically grow around and improve the quality of life. So I'm pretty excited about that. We're looking at working on this concept for COP30, which is in Belém, Brazil, later in the year.
If I may, I'd like to bring in one of our participants, Priya shared, who started us off. I will be working with the regional government of the Azores to create a participatory mapping tool to decide EV charger placement. I'd love to, if I may, just ask for all of your reactions or thoughts on that. It makes me think that we were discussing earlier, bringing data sets into these things and also the participatory part. So to me, that's a great example of, hey, we need to deploy EV chargers right now. A great opportunity to bring in the community voices to it.
Yeah, I mean, I could speak to that. I mean, I think that's a wonderful approach, community mapping, right? And there's great tools from Esri for doing story maps. This is a great use of GIS, and every map has as many layers as you could possibly imagine on it, from how people experience their community themselves to what they need within it to reporting on what they're seeing in this. So I completely applaud that approach. I think that's the right approach for community engagement, is to get people actively drawing on the map at what they want to see.
I'm going to share one more here, and then a last comment maybe from Taylor. I'll let you respond to it. Using generative AI to help write public comments to support various projects, either customizing form emails or creating comments from the project materials. From Jared shares that. Any reaction to that one from you?
Well, it's kind of a variation of that, where we are collecting survey data, interview data, et cetera, and building an agent-based model that could ideally capture the sentiment of the population. So you can basically do virtual surveys. And one of the reasons for that is you have the empty chair problem. For a lot of these community engagements, you tend to have older, retired, affluent property owners that show up. And, somebody with two young kids is not likely to, so, and et cetera. So if we can capture the values of a much more diverse population and build a simulation engine, then public policy people could run all kinds of surveys beforehand. And, you have the challenge of validation, of course, and bias, and there are a lot of problems there. But I think it's a really interesting approach.
We are so close on time. It's amazing how fast an hour can go when you're having a great chat. I want to first give a huge thank you to our panelists, our experts, for sharing your perspectives, your ideas, your innovations, your inspiration with us. It's been fantastic to get to speak with you. I want to thank everybody, all the participants that have been sharing their ideas in Slido. The joy of Future Fridays is that we do this the first Friday of every month. So don't go away. Join us next month, where we are going to be diving into cities as centers of resilience. We have some incredible speakers that will be coming to also share. And again, we want you all to come back and share your own thoughts and ideas on that as well. If you want to learn more, there are so many other things that are also happening as a part of our Future Cities initiative. So we welcome you to reach out and participate and join us in that. And again, let me just end with a virtual round of applause or a big thank you to all of our speakers today for joining us. And with that, again, have a wonderful Friday. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. It's been such a pleasure. Happy Friday.